Hello and welcome to our fourth expert discussion panel for the She Virtual Recovery Summit. I'm your host, Crystal Renaud-Day. On behalf of myself, my organization Living on Purpose, and my partner for this summit, Covenant Eyes, thank you so much for joining us for this panel. This panel specifically, I'm really jazzed about, y'all, because it's something that's really important when it comes to recovery. Obviously, healing trauma, healing the wounds of our addiction are very important. And we've had many conversations about that already. But today is kind of the heart, I think, of true recovery. And that's about implementing, embracing accountability, living in vulnerable community and accepting that as being part of your recovery journey. And how do you do it? How do you get there? And so that's what we're going to talk about for the next 90 minutes. I'm so excited for the three ladies who are joining me for this session. We have Ashley Jamison, Lisa Eldred, and Kimberly Johnson. Really excited to have them. If you're just joining us, just hopping into this call right now, please find that Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom application and post your questions there. They will be anonymous, so we will not share your name, any information about you other than what you share in the question itself. And we want to ask and answer as many questions as we can today to give you the most well-rounded information that we can. I also want to take this time to introduce our ladies now. If you go around the circle here a little bit and let each one of these wonderful speakers share a little bit about themselves, their background, and what they do. We'll start with you, Ashley.
I am Ashley. I work at Pure Desire. I've been part of the speaking team for almost 5 years now. And I am a contributing author to Unraveled, Managing Love, Sex, and Relationships, our workbook for women. And I just really have a passion for what we do, helping women, parents, teens, church leaders, anyone who wants to get involved, giving them information they need, because I myself have a past of love and sex addiction, as well as just a lot of brokenness, becoming pregnant with twins my senior year of high school, and a divorce and a remarriage and betrayal trauma through my husband's sexual addiction. So just a lot of messiness and a real desire to help people not have to go so long looking for help, because there's a lot of hope and joy that is found when you experience real freedom from these issues.
Yeah, thank you very much. How about you, Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Eldred. I have been an employee of Covenant Eyes for 10 years now, and I have written a number of ebooks while I've been there. The most recent one is, of course, New Fruit, which Crystal and I co-wrote. And you'll find our own story, like us both sharing our own stories in there, just of, how pornography impacts women in particular, or how we have found and are living in recovery from our own pornographic issues.
Thank you. Kimberly.
Hi, I'm Kim Johnson, and I live in Houston, Texas. I have been, I founded Divine Identity Ministry at the beginning of 2014. I came out of my own sexual addiction issues, and the Lord kind of led me into counseling, specializing in sexual addiction to help others, the same way that I was helped. And kind of like Ashley said, as I was going through my recovery, it was really hard to find women that struggled, struggled like this, and find resources for women, because it's such a shameful thing for women. And so I just also, along with the other ladies here, just really have a heart to help ladies in particular.
Thank you so much. Really glad to have all of you with us today. I'm really excited about this conversation that we're going to have. We've had a few questions come in already. If you've just joined us, you can submit your own questions via the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom application. Those will be shared anonymously, so feel free to share whatever it is that's on your heart today about that, particularly about accountability, about community. How do we get there? All right, so we'll start with our first question. It's actually one that came in before we even started today. And this one says, I have been dealing with porn addiction and masturbation for 7 years, and I've heard that accountability is first steps in overcoming my addiction. How do I implement and embrace accountability in my life? And Kimberly, can you answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are several different ways. The first recommendation that I have is pray. Ask the Lord to lead you and guide you. There's a lot of different ways we can have accountability. A great way to start, and I'm sure Lisa will agree with me, is covenant eyes. A lot of people say, they don't have anyone to be accountable to. Well, the first place to start then is covenant eyes. Great, excellent tool. And, and begin, like I said, ask the Lord to lead you to someone. Keep your eyes open. You can find people at your church. There are accountability groups online. A great app is called Our Tribe, where you can meet other people who struggle with something similar. And I'm going to put it in the notes here. The R stands for recovery. It's an app that you can download. And also Celebrate Recovery is another great resource to find people that you can be accountable to as well. There's a Chinese proverb that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I have really found that to be true in my own recovery and in the recovery of men and women that I have worked with. That, the Lord, this is a very important step in recovery. Just like the person that asked this question said, they're being told that, they believe that. And so we have to have faith in a God that is going to provide us what we need for our recovery. I also just really like to mention that very often it's not the person that you think that it's going to be. I am a woman. I'm 5'6" tall, 5'6" tall. I am, I'm a heavy set, kind of a tomboy. And the lady that the Lord led me to for accountability weighs less than 100 pounds. She's barely 5 feet, and she is the prissiest girl that you would ever meet. I would have never selected her for myself, but she is who the Lord selected for me. So I said that to say, keep an open mind. And because in hindsight, the people the Lord sent my way were absolutely perfect. They weren't what I would have selected, but they were exactly what I needed for my healing. So I hope that helps a little bit to get you started in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else want to add?
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I will. Kimberly, just as you said, we all find our healing in a little bit different of ways. But when you don't feel like you have accountability, I am the one that says you might be the one to start the accountability group, because that's how I found my recovery. When I actually didn't jump into my own sexual and love addiction recovery for myself, but it was after going through betrayal trauma recovery with my husband that opened my eyes to my own issues. And so when I was searching for betrayal trauma help with my husband's addictions, we looked everywhere, and I was so hurt, and I read all my Bible, and I did everything the church was telling me to, because I went to my church. But if your church is not equipped with how to handle women's sexual and pornography addiction issues, they might not have good advice for you. It may just be, are you reading enough? Are you praying enough? Are you doing those things? And so as that was the advice I got, I started changing my prayers to what's been mentioned by the other ladies here, to God, bring me somebody who knows how to help me in this area. Bring me tools and resources. And we ended up getting a job transfer. And I was just praying, God, land me in the right spot to get help for this. And I kid you not, we moved on a Saturday, went to a church the next day in our neighborhood, and we sat down, and the pastor was saying, we're starting a brand new thing called Pure Desire Ministries. And I was like, this is such an answer, but there still wasn't a group for women. And so that's where me, as a brand new person in this big church, went up to the pastor and said, is there any help for women? And he said, no, but we need it. You can go ahead and start it. And it was messy and chaotic and crazy. And 5 years ago, we didn't have all the tools and resources and help we have now at Pure Desire in the way we do. But what it did was it got the conversation going, and it created that group where we could meet once a month together. And so you could be the one to start a group or online groups. Pure Desire offers online groups for men who struggle, women who struggle, spouses of men or spouses of women. And so there's a place to start somewhere. So just make that first step in getting connected, whether it's with counseling, starting your own group, getting in an online group, but make a first step, because isolation is the worst thing that you can do to stay in and try to get healthy.
I think the only thing I would add to all of that is if you start with someone with accountability and things are just not working out with them, don't be afraid to fire them. Like, go back, start praying again, go and ask God, like, okay, this person didn't seem to be the right fit for at least long term, but, who do you want me, give me someone, give me the support that I need, Lord, and he will be faithful and he will answer.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you.
And give yourself grace and permission to know, like these ladies said, that it is messy, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. And if you have a bad experience the first time, it doesn't mean you don't need accountability. Mm-hmm. It means you try again. And if you're scared, that's okay. That means that you're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to mention something. This week, maybe you've watched my daily rundown videos, and I reference how we have every day at 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time during the summit, virtual meetups. These are an opportunity for you women to meet other women who are attending the summit, and meet on Zoom just like this and have a conversation with them, and see, is this person a good fit for me? Is this somebody that I can possibly be an accountability partner with, even though they're not maybe in your own community? We're in an age right now where we're socially distant anyway, so we might as well be connecting over Zoom and phone and text anyway. And so you can meet women through that. And we have a couple of questions actually from women who've already engaged in those this week, and are also other who are asking, so what now? What do we do now that we've met? What are some next steps? And in the chat, we will link both to that virtual meetup that happens later today and tomorrow, but also linking to an online discussion guide. It's actually from Covenant Eyes. I've implemented it or adapted it to an online web form. So you can submit that to each other via email. And it's just questions you can ask each other that are not just, have you struggled this week, but how's your heart? Where are you at? And understanding that accountability is not just about the do's and don'ts of behavior, but it's about having an accountable relationship, having intimacy and vulnerability with other people, letting them into your space, into your heart and mind, so they know how to help you, how to support you, not just behaviorally, but emotionally and spiritually as well. So I'll let you guys answer that as well, give more advice. So a couple of the questions were related to having just met and what do we do now. I met a few ladies at the virtual meetup, and I would like some guidance on how to effectively start and build an accountability group. And I've met some girls to be accountability partners with via the Zoom call this week. We don't know each other. What are some ways that we can, over the phone, keep each other accountable? We all agreed that we're afraid that the friendship we made here this week will disappear without ways to be intentional. So I'll start with Ashley for that.
I am a huge advocate for having some kind of curriculum to keep you on track. Yep. And the reason for that is I have a real scattered brain. We're very busy as a society, and it's easy, especially when you're struggling with addiction, to let things go, to make excuses, to say, oh, one person can't make it this week, or what do we talk about? And so as some of your other speakers have alluded to in their talks previously, Crystal, that it's hard to know how to pull yourself out of something with the same brain that got yourself into it. And so when you're using a resource or a curriculum to help guide your conversation with your friends, then what you're doing is you're bringing in an outside resource, whoever wrote that, and they're going to help guide the questions that help pull you out of that addictive thinking, that broken thinking. And so it can be a little challenging when you're just sitting in a group with all women who are struggling and there is no resource you're using, because then you can just continue to try to do what you've always been doing. And sometimes that doesn't work when you just keep doing the same thing. And so I say find a resource. I know that on this Summit, there are tons of resources that have been listed, whether it's a book you guys are going to read together and then come together each week and share. Our Unraveled resource for women has weekly tools for that holistic care, sleeping, eating, exercising. And then it also has the working through trauma and the behavior patterns and implementing new tools to get out of addiction. But even as simple as, me running a a sexual health group for my teenagers and their kids, or their friends, I never just sit there and say, let's talk, because they're not going to do that. People who are afraid or coming to you with their brokenness or their shame are not going to just know what parts to dig out, because sometimes their brains will protect them from that. And so having something that draws out the right discussion and gives them some traction is so important. So maybe your next group will be, what curriculum are we going to go through as a group? And, what tools are we going to use each time we meet?
Another great option as well is, Unraveled is awesome. There's so many great resources now available for women who struggle that used to not be, but now they're starting to come together, which is really, really exciting. To self-promote for myself, my 90 Days to Wholeness workbook is 90 days. So it's a 3-month curriculum, essentially, as you're going through together, daily accountability, daily scripture, daily prompts to work through. So you can come together and say, hey, what do you think of day number 5 or day number 10, and have conversations related to those particular days. And gets you in the Word, gets you in conversation, and gets you journaling. The paperback version includes coloring pages and a journal space. So it's really good for meditation as well. Just side note. Anybody else have thoughts about how to start this kind of thing?
I think that the person that asked the question is very wise in saying we have a fear that if we're not deliberate, we will lose these friendships. And that's a very valid fear. And you're very wise to know you will have to be very deliberate. Accountability is incredibly deliberate. I like what Ashley said a lot about having a format. And also, just kind of like I mentioned in the last question, remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. This can be fluid. It's probably going to have to change as you go, as you learn. Okay. Don't get locked into any one type of accountability. I know for me, a big struggle for me was masturbation. And I actually spent 2 years daily checking in with my accountability partner. And I tell my clients, it doesn't have to be, if you're going to have a daily check-in, if you need that, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be something as simple as a thumbs up. You know what it means. They know what it means. Okay. But absolutely, it's going to have to be something very deliberate. And I recommend one of the biggest downfalls I've seen in accountability is that people aren't clear with each other about what the expectations are. And it just kind of ends up falling by the wayside like that. So I recommend being incredibly clear about what you're looking for, about what you're going to do, about the structure that you're going to have, about what you're looking for in the other person, about what they realistically can do for you and what you can do for them.
Yeah, that's really good, Kimberly. And there's a lot of good group guideline, how to lead an effective small group, just touch points that would be good to go over in each group. And then I don't know if Lisa said it, but it's something we use at Pure Desire, that everybody should just automatically install Covenant Eyes on their phone and have each other be their accountability partners. Excellent. So that you can check up on each other and say, hey, I got a flag on your report this week. What's that about? I do that with my sons all the time. Hey, what's this? And it opens up conversation as well as lets them know that helps them resist temptation on their phones.
And just a side note really quick, you can try Covenant Eyes for free right now, 30 days free. Just use the promo code SHESUMMIT, linked there in the chat as well.
And accountability feels kind of weird at first, and it almost feels like, somebody's watching you, but it very quickly will shift to a feeling of being maybe violated or spied on, to a feeling of being incredibly safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've experienced this a lot just in my own. I mean, as we probably all know, as healthy recovery women, that have got through that first phase of whatever addiction was, that you're always working on yourself. And so your relapse may look different, like anger or overeating, or, something that you're always trying to work on yourself. And I know for me, once you establish that accountability group, when I'm in that really low place, if I can just reach out and text my group, terrible day, they know, they jump on it and they check up on me. And for me, that's all I need to do. Maybe it's all I can muster up is letting my group know. But once you establish that trust, it's such a lifesaver to have that in your life.
Awesome. Really helpful. Thank you. Okay. So this question is already answered. Okay. Let's see. I love how people ask questions, but they're always so very long. So I'm trying to read through them to make sure that we know what I'm talking about here. Lisa, we'll start with you for this one. I found myself becoming really dependent on my accountability partner, even sometimes calling or texting her for support more than God. I also noticed I was calling her after I would binge porn instead of before, and that wasn't helpful. What are some boundaries you'd recommend when having an accountability partner?
A nice, easy question for me, right?
Yep.
To be honest, I would start by having that conversation directly with your accountability partner. Chances are, I'm assuming that it's a woman that you're an accountability partner with, or that you've gotten as a partner. Talk to her. Like, she probably wants to, like, she signed on to help you, right? Like, she is there. She wants to see you recovered. She would probably rather, be, texted while she's about to start her family dinner for, so that she can at least text you back and say like, hey, I'll say a quick prayer for you or something like that. That is part of what she signed on for, but do have that conversation directly with her and say like, hey, I feel like, I don't want to become a burden on you and your family and distract you from like whatever's going on in your life. Just, let her make it clear too. So there's this mental philosophy of some people are askers and some people are like basically they only ask a question if you have to say yes. And some people are more of a no, they'll just ask and it's okay if you say no. And so this is one of those times of be very open with your partner and say okay, we're setting the boundaries. I need you to be honest with me too. The other thing that we encourage is reciprocity of whether or not she's struggling personally with pornography, just make sure that the relationship isn't entirely you-centered. Are you asking her about her life? Are you asking her what's going on? Are you, genuinely caring about her as a person as well?
Really good. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
As a group leader, I lead groups in churches and out of my home and online as well. And I've experienced this. And I've experienced this as a leader, the person needing me a lot. It's not a bad thing, but sometimes it's good as a leader if you can ask, not to shame anybody, because we go through these cycles of healing. And if you're finally realizing that you can be totally vulnerable and honest with somebody and that they love you anyways, and they still want to help you, that's amazing. And so you can tend to want more of that feeling and bond to that person. But as a leader, what I like to do is I'm here for you. And especially between these hours. I mean, because I have 4 kids and, a job and a husband, and I want to make sure that I stay healthy myself too, as a person who's been in all these different addictions before. And so I first set clear boundaries. And so as Lisa was saying, that would be a great conversation to have. What are your time restraints and what are your boundaries? Are there any hours that I text you that you'd prefer I didn't because that's your family time? So asking those kind of questions. And then as a leader, I ask, okay, you've had a hard day or you've relapsed, but have you done the things that you're supposed to do before calling me? Have you been doing your tools? Have you filled out a faster scale? Have you completed a crash site analysis? Have you implemented your recovery action plan? These are all tools that we use in our groups and counseling at Pure Desire. But if somebody is struggling over and over and over, but they're not showing up to group every week, they're not sharing, they're not doing their homework, they're not implementing the tools after they have a relapse, and they're just going straight to calling me saying, this is hard, I need help. I'm going to first say it is hard and it's a struggle for everybody, but you first have to do the things you know that are going to help you retrain your brain and retrain your thinking. And then if things still aren't working and you're still struggling, let's have some more conversations. But try, it's like somebody who's sick and goes to the doctor and they don't take the prescription, they don't do the treatment, but they want to keep coming back and saying, this is hard. Can we talk? Can I have a meeting? And he's like, why didn't you do the physical therapy? Have you taken the medicine I prescribed? And so as a leader, that's kind of what I say. And so as the person asking this question, ask those things. And, what are your boundaries? What are your time frames that you appreciate having texts and calls? And then also, what are the things I should do and try before calling you? And that kind of sounds a little harsh sometimes, but as leaders, you gotta help people be able to help themselves as well as being a loving, listening ear.
I think it does require tough love sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. Could I add something?
Yeah.
I just want to say, first of all, the person that asked this, you might be doing better than you think, because a lot of times people that are really dependent don't even know it. Okay. So if you are seeing this in yourself, that's a really good thing. And you can start taking the steps of making sure that you're being deliberate about going to the Lord as well as your accountability partner. And I just want to say, sometimes we feel a little bit of shame in having an accountability partner. We might tell ourselves, well, God should be enough. And it's not God or people, it's God and people. And if you are feeling a little bit dependent, you don't want to stay at that place, but that really is a very natural step in the process. And now that the Lord is allowing you to see it, you can start to take, healthy measures that, some of the specifics that these ladies have mentioned. And also, I want to just speak to what you said about how you are finding yourself reaching out to your accountability partner after you slip as opposed to before you slip. Sometimes when we find that we do that, I think that if we can make us telling our accountability partner that we slipped a little more uncomfortable for ourselves by working out a list that our accountability as partner is going to ask us each time we slip. Okay. I know she's, just for example, you might have your accountability partner ask you, well, why didn't you reach out to me before you slipped? What was your trigger? What are you going to do next time so this doesn't happen? Is there anything that you're not telling me that you should have done that you didn't do? Is what you're doing working? Do you need to make any changes? I know for me, when I got to a point that as I mentioned earlier, masturbation was a big deal for me. And the longest I had ever gone for 8 months without masturbating, or what was 8 months without masturbating. And when I got to that point with my new accountability partner, I realized I needed to add something. And I actually opened up to my pastor and I said, you know what, I am at this point and this is so embarrassing, but I know if I have to come back and tell you that I slipped, that's going to be a huge deterrent. And I can tell you, I sailed right on through that 8 months all the way to about 15 years now. Okay, so because of that. And so you might want to, add something to make it a little more uncomfortable for yourself to tell either that person or maybe add somebody else that you really don't want to tell that you slipped.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have a question for Ashley. How do I navigate this topic with my children, 18 and 19? I'm terrified to have a Bible study on the topic or even get Covenant Eyes on my phone at this point, versus earlier when we could have said we all did this.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite topics. I wish I could pull up my phone pictures from last night of my living room full of teenagers and me trying to get them to not be so crazy while I'm talking to them about pornography's effects on the brain. And it can be uncomfortable. I just had this conversation last night with my husband, so it's a perfect raw material for me to answer this question. I've been talking to my kids since they were really little about sex and healthy sexuality. But I will say it is a whole lot easier to talk to them if you've been through your own healing of your own past and navigated your own distorted beliefs about sexuality or misperceptions or experiences. As you navigate those, it gets easier. It doesn't make it easy. It's still awkward and uncomfortable, but you do it on an age appropriate level. This could be a whole talk on its own, so I'm going to try to not be super long-winded. On Pure Desire's resource under the blogs and podcasts, we have a couple podcasts and blogs on how to talk to your kids about sex, how to, help my kids looking at porn. What do I do? And so if you want to hear like 30-minute discussions on each topic, go there. But for little kids, it's a lot of just talking about your body and calling, their body parts what they are, vagina and penis, and making it so it's not so uncomfortable and shocking so they can talk to you. My little 9-year-old would just ask me very straight questions. And, I heard this word, what does this mean? Because we've made it just a normal conversation. With my little girl, I've shared, if anything ever happens to you at a house and you're there and, kids want to start being curious and they're wondering what, each other looks like. Those are things where I want you to come to mommy right away. And some parents get a little afraid of that because they're afraid they're putting ideas in their kids' head. But what I found is that our world is so saturated in exposure that they are going to be exposed to something. Even when I homeschooled my kids, they're still exposed to something. And so me talking to them really gives them a mental rehearsal. And so when that experience did happen with my daughter, she was able to come and say, that just happened right now. And I was able to address it in the moment. And so that's kind of what it looks like with littler kids. With my older teenagers, I have teenage boys that are 17. Them and their friends, it's a totally different story because I have a huge group of teenagers and some have looked at porn, some have crossed boundaries, sexually, this whole group of teenagers. I'm not going to assume I know exactly where they're at because I was a teenager and I was super sneaky. And so I don't go in assuming they are all pure white virgins because I got that talk when I was 16 and I had already had sex and I'd already been raped as a virgin at that point. And I was so ashamed that it pushed me back out to the world where I felt, at least I'm safe out here because people aren't condemning me that I've done these things before. In the church, it feels unsafe. And so I don't go into any teen talk with the assumption that they're here and I'm going to tell them to stay here until marriage. I want to go in saying, I'm not going to assume I know your whole sexual beliefs or history, but as your mom, it's my job to teach you. And that's what I tell my boys when they're acting up and they're fighting and wrestling, I'll throw a pillow at them and say, hey, it is my job to give you a sexual education because we educate you on everything else, finances and which college you should go to and how to eat. And it's parents' job to talk to you about sexual health. And so just starting the conversation with them can be so good. For teenagers, finding video resources are amazing. We've shown Fight the New Drug video series to our teenagers, and I'm going to show it to them again because they don't always like to sit down, look at you eye to eye across the table and say, well, let's have a talk about sex. That's not what teenagers like to do. And so if you can put something else in, a focus, and I find that when I invite their friends over, it's even easier because then it's not me sitting down with my 2 boys. It's a big group of boys. Some of them are more talkative. Some of them are goofy. Some are more serious. And I can throw the question out to the group and it's not as intimidating for one child to be having that. And so I think it was Kimberly that said, don't get stuck in one way of accountability. It's the same thing with teenagers. You have to be able to shift and pivot pretty quickly. And if you see this isn't really working, let me shake it up. Let me put a video in, or let me invite some of their friends over. Maybe it will give it a better group dynamic. And so really just try and just start the conversation and just allow it to be a house where it's safe to talk about sex. Even if they don't right now, they'll remember.
Really, really good. Thank you. Anyone else have thoughts on that for parents?
Not any thoughts, but I do have a resource here that I just want to put in the notes. I don't know if it's doing it. Let me see.
While you do that, we also want to reference Kristen Judson of Protect Young Minds. If you have younger children and you're trying to navigate how to have early porn conversations with them, protectyoungminds.org is a great place to go. Kristen spoke on Monday, so her session is no longer available for free, but with the All Access Pass, you can get access to that session as well.
And what I added, John Fort, he specializes in working with parents, and him and his oldest son, Lucas, have written some books together, and John just has some great material.
Yeah, John Fort is wonderful, yeah.
He is, yeah.
I see there on the chat thing that the mom was saying, how do you help them if it's you struggling? How do you know what to share with them? And so that piece of her question, if you're currently in a struggle, I don't think you need to be, it's important to share what you've gone through as a teenager with your teenagers, because it helps them know what realistic expectations are. One of the biggest thing I hear from working with parents are, I had sex before I married their dad, or I had an abortion, or I had, they're afraid to tell their kids these things, but they're coming to us for help with their kids who are rebelling, but then they're still afraid to tell their kids what they went through. And what that does is it creates this gap that the kids think, my parents are perfect, so I can't talk to them, or I can't live up to what my parents were. And I think on some level, if you're currently struggling, you can still say things like, my husband was still struggling with porn while my teenagers were becoming teens. And so before he got, some true traction on his recovery, he was still struggling with that. And so it's okay to say, we're going to put these covenant eyes on everybody's phone, because no shame to you as a teenager who may be struggling, that all of us are tempted by things. And even as adults, we can get lured back into temptation. And that's when I would use some examples of my teenage years. Even if I'm currently struggling with something now, I can go back and use something that was from their age that I struggled with and say, when I was 16, I struggled with these kinds of things. And really the way our society is, it's really easy to fall in. So we're going to do these things to protect our mind and just make it easier to avoid certain temptations. All of us need good boundaries. There's some boundaries in our life where they'll always be in place because it's just good for you relationally and emotionally or physically or whatever it is. And so try to share something that you can connect with them. It doesn't have to be what you did last night, but when you are recovered and they're a little older, you may have a time to share a fuller disclosure with them.
Really good. Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask one more specific question, and then we will go into kind of rapid fire questions. But I want to ask this of Kimberly. I want to kind of, let me sure I'm asking the right question. Sorry. There was a really good one for you that I wanted to ask. Yes, I want accountability, but unsure about holding someone else accountable since I'm new to recovery from masturbation and pornography. How do you deal with triggers while in accountability relationships?
I think that I don't, Crystal, what do you think is meant here by how do you deal with triggers?
I think hearing the stories of your accountability partner might trigger your own.
Okay. If you are fearful of this, and, I really welcome anybody else speaking a different opinion. If it's possible, maybe find someone that you're not their accountability partner at the time. I know people do different things. And there was a point that I added people in my journey that also struggled with what I struggled with. But when I began, and it could just be because I didn't know anyone else that struggled, but the people that I partnered with did not have those struggles. So if at all possible, find someone who doesn't. But another thing is, if you want to be accountability partners with someone else who does struggle, you are going to have to set some pretty strict boundaries then at the beginning if triggering is a problem. Okay. You may want to let them know, give me a thumbs up if you didn't, struggle to masturbation. Or let's say, for example, if they begin to go into detail, let them know that 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 they may need to talk to someone else about that, don't be afraid to set boundaries for yourself, okay? Because a lot of us who struggle with sexual addiction, especially masturbation, it really is because of a lack of nurture in our lives very often. And so if you need nurturing, and that might be why you're going to masturbation, don't be afraid to set boundaries for yourself. Don't be afraid to say what you don't need as well as what you do need. And, the truth of the matter is you might be triggered. And just because you are triggered does not mean that you shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It means that you are a person who has wrestled with sexual things in your life, okay, and that you're being triggered, and it's okay, but also be very aware of it, of the boundaries that you need to set. Don't let it stop you from going forward. And I can't remember who said it earlier, but don't be afraid to share with the person what your fears are going forward, because the truth is that we are all more alike than we are different in this struggle. We all are very unique creatures, of course, but if you are going to be an accountability partner with somebody that struggles with the same thing you struggle with, they probably also struggle with being triggered. So the two of you can protect one another. Okay, there's going to be a lot of fears that come up with accountability, and a lot of that is because the enemy knows that accountability is one of the best ways out of this struggle. So find a way to maneuver through the fear and know that if it's not this fear, there's going to be another fear that comes up. And because this is something that God has set up for your recovery, God is going to set up a way to work through it.
And boundaries are really good. And so I've seen even in the groups I lead, they don't even say the words porn or masturbation. They say P and M, just so they don't, because there's so much connotation with certain words too, that sometimes vocabulary is difficult. So if you can, I don't want to dumb it down or use or don't use real words for things, but sometimes when it comes to being triggered, and certain words and vocabulary can be difficult for some in that process of accountability, when it's especially early on in recovery. One thing I do want to point out, we have something brand new that we just created this week as a way for women who struggle, who are attending the summit, can connect with other women who struggle, hoping for accountability or even a sponsor. If you're further along in your struggle and you're kind of at that point where you feel like I could probably be of a greater support to someone else, we have the She Recovery Accountability Network. We're going to link to that in the chat, and that's a opportunity for you to submit your information. You're going to submit your name, awesome, email, and what your struggle is and how long you've been struggling. Are you sober? And that way people can look at this, basically this database of women, and say, this person sounds like me, or this person sounds further along than me. Maybe they can help me. And it's just basically a way to connect with others who are at the summit, who are going through this same thing right now that you are. And then again, this afternoon at 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time, we have a virtual meetups as well. You can link to that from the summit site. Okay, so rapid fire questions. If you have more questions for our guests here today, please put those in the Q&A box. We are halfway through our time, so we want to get to as many questions as we can. There's a couple of questions that came through the chat that my assistant gave me that weren't actually in the Q&A. So do you find support needs to come from someone who has similar experience, like how AA uses people in the program to sponsor one another? What are your thoughts on that? Anyone?
I think it just needs to, it should be someone who cares about you. It does not necessarily need to be someone who's been through the same things. And it's partially because of that triggering thing that Kimberly was just talking about. An accountability partner, for the most part, like, they might read a couple of ebooks, but they are not trained professionals. They won't be able to make the connections between, oh, you watched this specific type of pornography and you had this experience in your childhood. Like, that's what a therapist is for. The accountability partner is just going to be kind of the person who comes alongside you and says, okay, hey, so you just said that you struggled. I don't need to know the details of what you struggled about. But, kind of walk through that checklist that we talked about earlier of like, okay, what triggered you? I love the question that I think Kimberly said of like, is there something that you're not telling me that you were or that you were supposed to do that you didn't, like, and just kind of enforcing that honesty. And so from that perspective, it really, it does not need to be someone who necessarily has had the same struggles. It just needs to be someone who cares. At Covenant Eyes, we kind of use the mantra of affirm, ask, and achieve for accountability partners or allies, as we call them in our system, of basically you are there to, as an accountability partner, to affirm your friend and just remind her that she is created in the image of God, that God still loves her, that God wants her to heal, to ask those tough questions, and then to help her achieve her sobriety goals. So.
Really good. Anyone else?
I think that it can be both. I just have found in my own recovery in particular that having people accept me that didn't necessarily understand my struggle or have my struggle, I found it to be very, very healing.
It's being accepted.
Right. Mm-hmm. By people that might not have even struggled with this themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I love this question because this is the one that comes up quite a bit. When you are an accountability partner, what can you say or what should you do when someone tells me they fell into temptation again?
Mm-hmm. So another plug for Covenant Eyes here of if you're not using Covenant Eyes already, one of the things we implemented actually in the back end, this is not something that you can just fill out a form and do. We actually have an email series for new allies as they are added into the system that they get, that it's 1 week of walking them through, okay, what does accountability look like? And so it goes into things like affirm, ask, and achieve. So that just another little plug there of like, there are like just tools for support. Go ahead, Ashley.
That's kind of what I was going to piggyback off you. And going back to that question asked, like, what do we do to not lose our group on the phone call? For somebody who's an accountability partner, especially if they're not a counselor or somebody who really knows this arena, then having some kind of tool or roadmap of what to do when somebody relapses is probably going to be your very best bet. Because when somebody tells you, I just relapsed and maybe it's, I just had an affair on my husband. I mean, it could be something really heavy. And if you don't have some kind of guidelines on how to respond to them, then what it can feel like is you need to try to help them feel better, fix their problem, become the counselor, start just saying things to try to help them feel better in the moment. And that sometimes can just be spinning your wheels. And so having a tool, like Lisa was saying, if you're in one of our Pure Desire groups, then your leader would ask you, have you implemented A, B, and C and some of the tools and next steps? And we have when do you refer out to a counselor? Because was it a one-time relapse on porn where you put it away and you called your accountability partner right away? Or have you been living in secrecy and back in a complete addictive lifestyle? Or did you have an affair? It kind of depends. And so the person who's the accountability partner, if they just have not a whole, education on it, but just a quick, okay, if it's like more of a lapse type situation, then I can ask these questions. What are you going to do? What led up to it? What did we miss? What can we do next time? Or is it something where you say, I think it'd be really wise to get into a group or contact a counselor because this is a heavy issue and it's going to take somebody really processing this with you.
And recognize also that it's not your responsibility to make sure that they don't slip. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to say the perfect thing. You don't have to do the perfect thing. They already trust you and are looking to you. So, encourage them to get back up again. And, I like what Ashley said, have some structure for what you're going to do when they slip. This is their recovery, and they, whether they know it or not, they are the expert on their own recovery and what's going on, and help draw that out of them. Maybe ask them, hey, you had a slip. What's the best thing we can do to help you when you have a slip? Mm-hmm. And also, be loving and gracious, but accountability is, it's not supposed to be oppressive, but it also ought not to be so comfortable that every day she's telling you that she had a slip. So get with her, communicate, the two of you figure out, okay, what are we going to do when you slip to best help you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really like that too, because when I was going through my early recovery with betrayal trauma, I would tend to get triggered by the betrayal trauma and then go into my own spiral of addictive eating disorder behaviors again, or over shopping or watching TV, anger with my kids, yelling, throwing things. I mean, crazy monster. I know we all have our past, right? But I would, so the betrayal trauma would, and that's what triggers all addiction, is some kind of pain or missing need or something. And so mine happened to be betrayal trauma or abandonment. And then it would lead me to this craziness that I couldn't get out of, this dark, hole. And so when I started being accountable with my friends and coworkers and group members, and like I said, I could just get to that point where I said, okay, having a bad day, they knew what that meant. And it was so great for them to not just send me back a text with a scripture or something. Like, that's not what I needed in that moment. In that moment, I needed somebody to go, okay, you're hurting and this is not your fault, but how are you going to handle it? And what are you going to do? What are you going to put into place tonight to make sure that somebody else's choice is not going to cause you to then go into a further spiral? And then when the first time that happened, I was like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be babying here. I was just so hurt, but somebody was able to say, yeah, pain causes us to then want to medicate and feel better. And you get the choice of how to handle that. And so what it did was it put the ownership that I can't control all that goes on around my life, but how I respond to it and my recovery, I really have to take ownership for it. And I can't continue to just be in this victim role when somebody else is finally helping me see that there's a different way out. And so then at that point, it's my turn to choose. And so like you're saying, Kimberly, you can't just always be like so nice that they're just like, I relapse. Sometimes it's like that tough love where you're like, wait, I don't want you to tell me that I have to get my tools out and actually start working them. That's not why I texted you. And it was great. It was a real life changer for me.
Really helpful. Thank you so much. You have a question for our panelists. You find that Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom application and submit those questions to us. We have a few more minutes. We have 30 more minutes, actually. So we have time for several more questions. One question says, I'm receiving so much information in this summit, which is wonderful. I'm glad, but it's almost to the point of overwhelming. What's a good logical place to start in deciphering through the information to begin combating pornography and getting accountability?
Yeah. I feel like every single one of us could be like, well, go to my website and,
I get this. Oh, go ahead.
Covenant Eyes has like 2,000 blog posts. We have if you go to the website, there's a resources tab that has a bunch of ebooks on there on different topics addressing different things. And if Sam Black is lurking and listening in on the panel, he can probably pop up with a specific detail. I think it's tomorrow that we are going to release a giant landing page specifically for women with a bunch of frequently asked questions, links to outside resources, that sort of thing. I believe that's coming out tomorrow. So those would be the Covenant Eyes good places to start.
Mm-hmm. Also, if you haven't, you might want to purchase the pass that allows you, what is it, Crystal? Is it $50 that allows you?
Yeah, $49 all access pass. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can go back, you can review the information, and there is a lot of information. So maybe after you have absorbed everything, write down 1 or 2 steps for yourself to take. Okay, 1 step at a time. Maybe first thing is enroll in the accountability group. Okay. And then just take that next step, write down for yourself, okay, this is what I can do next. This is what I can do next. Maybe even write a separate list of things that you want to do eventually, but just pace yourself. There is going to be a lot of information coming to you, and that's good. Because there's a scripture where Jesus said, I have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. So apparently you are at the place that you can hear all of these resources for your recovery. So it's a good thing that you're overwhelmed with so much information, but just be gentle with yourself, make a list, one thing at a time. You don't have to absorb it all now. The last thing any of us want is for somebody to feel so overwhelmed that they go act out because they have so much information on how not to act out. So just pace yourself with it and review it, and the Lord will lead you and guide you on what to do when you need to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can get that way too. Right now I'm just not on social media at all. I mean, I know I am right now. I'm out there somewhere on the summit, but as far as like getting on, because my brain is overloaded with information right now, and then having COVID and kids home and working, and so we can get information overload because there's so much available out there right now. And so when I get women at our conferences that are like, I don't know where to start, I have sexual abuse and I have intimacy, issues with my spouse, and I have a betrayal past and my own addiction, and there's just so much information. I always tell them to just start with the piece that seems to stir the most emotion in them. And so like Kimberly's saying, buy that all access pass, and no brainer. I mean, if you don't have internet filter, put Kevin and Eyes on. That's like, step one, get the alcohol out of the house. Right. Yeah. So what Kimberly's saying, like buy the pass and then go through them. And if you're just breaking down crying because somebody's talking about grieving that they didn't have a mother, nurture them the way they feel like should have happened, maybe that's something you need to explore. Or a sexual abuse, or if the pornography, the shame, you hear a woman talking about the shame she experiences every time she uses pornography, and you're just, you're just wrecked inside. I say, listen to your body and really pay attention to your emotional responses, and then start with the one that is the most, that's just blaring that it needs help, that's racking you the most. And so, that would be a good place to start. And then from there, I bet you're going to start unraveling a whole bunch of other stuff. For me, I needed to start with my betrayal trauma, and it allowed me to get healing in an area that I couldn't see past. I couldn't see 3 inches in front of me because my betrayal trauma pain was so high. There's no way I could have started on masturbation issues or anything like that because I couldn't see past that pain. So start where there's the most emotion and then work your way out.
And one of the things I've really learned as a counselor and as a coach in this arena, and from my own story as well, is we know that this is not just a behavioral issue. We've said that multiple times today already. This is a holistic issue, body, mind, and spirit. And so when you have a lot of trauma, when you have a lot of pain, you're not going to be focused so much on your behavior at the beginning. You need to be focusing on healing your trauma. And that requires counseling. That requires getting a healthy community. That requires working on the broken pieces, letting God heal those broken pieces, because these behaviors are medication. They're medicating other things. And so it's not so easy to stop porn right away. It's not so easy to stop masturbation right away if you're blinded by your pain, if you're blinded by your trauma. So you got to start to feel your emotions, start to experience your emotions so that you don't feel the need to run from them into your addictive behaviors. So that's just a little tip there. One other thing a good place to start too. Yes, definitely. If you can't get to all the sessions and you want to get that all access pass for $49, but there's also a free resource right now written by myself and Lisa called New Fruit. It's an ebook available for free right now that you can download this week. It'll also be, I'm sure, on the Covenant Eyes Women's Resource page going forward. So definitely want to recommend that as well. Okay. I love this question. How honest should I be with my spouse if I fall into temptation, whether porn, chat site, texting someone I shouldn't? Should a spouse be a part of accountability system or better not to? Ashley?
I've got lots of opinions on this one, so I'd be happy to answer the question.
I don't know. You've got two single women on this call with you, so
yeah. So I've been on the receiving and the giving end of this question. And we have some blogs on honesty versus disclosure, which I think this is important to differentiate, that anybody who's going through a recovery process, there needs to be a point where there's a full disclosure. And that's where you sit down with your spouse and you give them, this is what happened early in childhood. And this was when I was first exposed. And between this year and this year of my life, I struggled with these behaviors, whether it's, prostitution or porn or, whatever it may be, stripping, whatever your sexual history is, all of it is laid out and mapped out in a coherent narrative to your spouse. And that just gives voice to everything. It gives clarity to everything. Everything's out there. The truth is out there, and you can start to reestablish trust and rebuild intimacy. And then also for the spouse who feels like if this woman asking the question struggles and her spouse may feel not good enough because she goes to porn or masturbation, it helps the spouse know that it's really not about their ability to meet her needs or their performance or anything like that. That a lot of times these addictions started a lot earlier before the spouse even came into the picture. It may have morphed over the years. And so that full disclosure is really healthy for just reestablishing trust. That's different though, because the person struggling can't do that until they fully understand their own story. And as all of us who've been through recovery, you realize so much more and more and more as your brain starts unlocking things, as you hear other women's story, you connect the dots, you realize why you do what you do. And so you give that narrative at the end, and preferably with a professional, sex professional. And then honesty though, as you're going through your recovery process, you can't really renew that spirit of intimacy and rebuild trust if you're being fully honest with your group or your accountability person, but then you're going home and you're sneaking, lying, and hiding. And so honesty has to be established. If there's any history of physical affairs, anything illegal, child pornography, anything at all that could jeopardize the safety of that other person, their life or physical safety, that needs to be disclosed right away with a professional. If you're struggling with something like pornography or masturbation, you need to be confessing those when you relapse every time. And so for some clinicians or some groups, they'll say once a week, there's a check-in time. And if there's any relapses, we'll share them then. I personally like to have relapses disclosed within 24 hours because I feel like if it goes any longer than that, then it can tend to escalate more times. It can happen more times. And so being honest during your recovery is a crucial part of healing, because you can't be one person in your group or your accountability meetings and then another with your spouse. It will still create a sense of shame, hiding, withdraw. When your spouse gets close to that area where they might discover that you relapsed, you're going to push back. You're going to start feeling uncomfortable. And so you're not going to get that true intimacy if you're not honest. But again, I would suggest using tools and having structure so that it's not just this blow up of somebody throwing something and another person cussing and saying, if you ever do that again, I swear this is the last time, I can't take it. That tends to be what it looks like. I mean, that is a picture of what our house looked like when there's no structure and there's no, okay, if this happens, then what? Do we shut down all the computer use in the house and you have to go to the library in order to do the bills for a month? And after that, like Kimberly was saying, make it more uncomfortable. Those consequences. If I have to go to the library once a month to do all my bills, or every time I want to get on the computer and I'm tired after work and I just want to go home, then the next time I'm tempted to relapse, I may think, I don't want to go through all that again for another month. I don't want to have that disconnect with my spouse because we decided that if I relapse again, we will, have a time of separation, not like divorce, but intimate separation or sleep in separate rooms. And I don't want to go through that all again. And so you have to have that honest disclosure with each other, and you have to have those honest consequences so that you can learn from them and realize, I don't want to go back there again. I don't want to have to go tell my pastor again that I, relapsed. And so you have to be able to talk that out with your spouse and then put those plans in place if a relapse happens.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
The one thing that I will add to that is that your spouse should not be your only accountability partner. You need, I mean, certainly counseling. We've noticed at Covenant Eyes, like, our customer support department, member care team, I think is the official title for them now. When they get calls from it, like usually it's the husband who's struggling and the wife. If the wife is the one who feels like she has to be the babysitter for her husband, that is not a good thing. I would say the same thing is true for if it's the wife who's struggling and the husband who, is like, you did not marry a babysitter. He should not be the only one who is taking care of you in this way. Find another woman who can come alongside you and walk along with you. The other thing that is worth mentioning is that it is probably more true for women who struggle that your husband may be dealing with his own sexual issues and sexual dysfunctions. That is not universally true, but it may be that he's got his own stuff going on. He will need his own recovery from what is quite honestly a betrayal to him. So do just keep those things in mind, that he will probably need some sort of counseling and support through all of this. I can't remember which of Marnie's books that she put this in. I think it was No Stones. Mm-hmm. And Crystal, you might recall that. But she was talking about when she started disclosing to her husband just some of the stuff that he was going through. Now, he wasn't struggling sexually, if I recall correctly. But he still had his own childhood wounds that were basically feeding into basically making him the type of person that she could use as a doormat. And kind of walk over. And so that was something that he had to walk through on his own. And so just bear that in mind as you are working with your spouse. Mm-hmm. He's going to need help and support too.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We have a couple of resources for husbands. We have Hope for Men, which is a workbook for men who have been betrayed by a spouse. And that's a workbook. It could be done in a group setting or with a clinician. Every once in a while, we have an online group for it. And then we have a book on our website called Mended, and it is a story of a woman's affair and, how they found help and how the husband had to find help and how they restored that.
Yeah, really good. Spouses, both sides need support in their own healing, and then so they can come together and heal together as well. I'm currently coming alongside several young women, 18 to 21, in a fight against sexual sins in our community. This isn't something that has really been addressed before in most of their lives. How can I lead the conversations in a positive way that is honoring to God? And is this something we can talk about as young women?
I've led a few groups for young women. And we teach the leaders of those groups. It's kind of like that parent that asked, how do I help my kid when I'm the one struggling? You really want to kind of go back to some of the struggles you faced when you were their age. I don't know if this woman leading them is the same age or if they're just going through it together. If they're peers going through it together, then that's exactly what it should look like. We want to make a change. We're going to go through this group together. We're all just going to bring our insights. But if it's an adult, somebody who has some experience, they can share their answers according to when they were that age and some of the struggles they faced as an 18 to 21-year-old. And that's a really good way to approach it.
Great. This person says, I'm new to exploring this area of recovery for myself, and there's a lot I don't know. What are some specific things to check in with sponsors and accountability partners about in starting this journey, and how often should check-ins happen? What has been successful in this area in your experience?
Well, what are some great specific things to check in with sponsors and accountability partners? The answer to that would be, what are your specific struggles, right? And how often should I check in? How often do you struggle? How often are you triggered? I can tell you my experience. I checked in daily, like I said earlier, with my accountability partner for 2 years. And we also checked in weekly. We had more of a sit down or, longer conversation where we had a list of questions set up about my week. For example, part of my acting out was acting out anonymously with people, and there was a certain area of town that I would go to act out. And so one of my questions was, did you go near that area? Did you avoid that street? Even if you had to travel someplace in that area, did you drive around that area? Were you triggered by abandonment this week? One thing that I have found is very helpful in my own accountability and those that I counsel is to have specific questions set up. And also at the end of it, I had my accountability people ask me, are you being honest with me? Is there anything you should be sharing with me? I have a young man. I've been working with him a little over 2 years, and it honestly feels a little awkward for me. And I'm like, do you still want me to ask you this? And after every session, he has me ask him, were you honest today? Are you hiding anything from me? Is there anything that you should be telling me that you're not? Is there anything that myself or your parents or anyone else in your life would be uncomfortable about that is going on with you if we knew it? And so it really depends on what you struggle with. I would say to start with, probably no less than once a week, especially if it's something pretty consistent that you struggle with, or a habit that you're trying to overcome. I have clients that check in daily with their accountability partner, or 3 times a week. If you're going to go, let's say, less than every day, have something specific set up. Don't just say 3 times a week. Say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the evenings, I will be checking in with you. If you don't hear from me, I would like you to reach out to me the next day. Okay. If it's once a week, on Saturdays in the morning, you and I will be talking. Okay. This is where it's really key to be very communicative with your accountability partner or your sponsor. Let them know what you're looking for, what they can do, what the two of you can work out together.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just from listening to Ashley, I'd like to know if fear should be the reason or motivation to not relapse. Also, is in the context of accountability, what do you do when your accountability partner doesn't know what to do when you've had a relapse? The struggle was with masturbation. Okay.
I got the first question, and that's probably connected to me referring to the word consequences. So I'll answer the first question, and I might have to have you read me the second question again. When we refer to consequences, and you can go to our website, I'm not good at typing in that little chat box. I'm afraid I'm going to shut down the whole screen if I try to do anything. So otherwise, I was trying to put things in there. I was like, I'm terrible.
Oh, we got you.
Okay. So if you go to puredesire.org and you go under the free tools, you can find recovery action plan for spouses and recovery action plan for addicts. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, you choose either addict or spouse. And then we also have 2 podcasts. We also have 2 podcasts on creating a recovery action plan. One is number 18 and one is, I think, 158. And so those will go way more into how to create one and what we mean. But when you're struggling with addiction, you first need to understand what your relapse is. As the addict, you need to understand, what is my relapse? That place I say I never want to go again, that place that hurts others, that place that harms my relationships with myself, others, and God. And as the spouse, you need to realize, what is my spouse doing that hurts me so deeply, that breaks my trust, that breaks intimacy? And so you're going to go through these steps. Identify relapse. It's going to look a little different for the spouse and the addict. And then you're going to identify what the natural consequences are. That when we do something, it creates a natural consequence. Every action we do has a natural consequence, whether good or bad. Consequence is just the result. And so it could be good or bad. If I go to the gym, the consequence of that is I get in better shape. And so what is the natural consequence? Meaning nobody has to implement anything to do it. So if my relapse is pornography and masturbation, and the natural consequences, that makes my spouse feel unneeded. It makes them feel like they've been cheated on. It makes them feel insecure when it comes to being sexually intimate. Those are natural things that I didn't have to go do it. It's because this behavior caused it, caused those feelings. And so it could cause me to have shame, withdraw from God. There's a whole bunch, whether you're single or married. And so you have to filter through and decide what happens emotionally, physically, financially. Do I overspend? Do I go broke? Am I short on my bills? Am I putting myself at risk for STDs? What happens when I do this behavior? And then from there, after you define your natural consequence, you're going to identify what the logical consequence is. And this is something you implement so that you can start rebuilding trust, gaining recovery, reestablishing intimacy. Basically, it's your plan for recovery. You want to implement something. And so as you've heard some of the people, Lisa may say, put covenant eyes on your phone, or Kimberly may say, my consequence is going to be, I'm going to go talk to my pastor because I don't ever want to go there. But I want something that's almost visual and tangible that I can associate with my behavior to help me measure how big of a deal this is and how it does have an impact, that my secrets and my sins are not just harmless and don't impact anybody. And so you're bringing it on the outside so you can really see and weigh that when my behavior comes out, it creates these feelings and behaviors. And now I need to implement something to give myself traction instead of just staying stuck in my shame and my guilt. And so it may be, as a single person, if I relapse on pornography, I might say, I'm gonna donate $100 to a ministry that helps with sex trafficking, rescuing people or shutting it down. And that could mean I have to work overtime. And that could mean I have to give up a night with my friends. And so it's not that you're trying to punish yourself, but you want yourself to feel the weight of your actions so that the next time you go to look at porn, you're like, I do not want to give up another Friday of working overtime or having to give up friends for the weekend because I need to work to make this, payment. And so you're going to decide what will help you put together that your behaviors have a consequence. And so that's just one example that, my behavior of looking at porn hurts other people, not just me. And so when I have to make a payment to an organization that fights against these things, it helps me connect the dots that this is not just a harmless behavior that doesn't have an impact anywhere. And so that's what I mean by consequence. But you can go listen to those other podcasts. You can read through the tools because that can be a hard one to wrap your mind around. And that's why we do it after people learn boundaries and trauma and history and patterns. It's not something that you just do right away up front.
So I'd like to add to that, but by taking it in a little bit of a different nod direction, if that's okay. So one of the passages that I have kept coming back to over the last couple of years is that parable of the man who kicks a demon out of his house. And the demon goes and he wanders off in the wilderness and he comes back and, the house is there and it's empty and it's in perfect condition and whatnot. And the demon's like, oh, great, let's move back in and bring 7 friends with us this time. And the man is in worse off than before. The way that I have been applying that is that you need to fill your life with better things. You cannot just say, I've quit porn. You have to be doing something better and something healthier and something that brings you joy, quite honestly. Whatever that looks like. I've got an entire ebook out there called Hobbies and Habits directly on this topic. So, the question originally said something like, the Lisa Eldred kind of rough translation was, should accountability really be fear-based? And yes, consequences, do the consequences thing too, but also do things like, if you are holding someone accountable or, if you have an accountability partner and you're trying to figure out what that relationship does, have them ask you things like, especially in your weekly check-in or whatever it is, what are you doing to bring you joy in your life? Ashley's got a piano behind her. I don't know if you actually play piano, but, it's things like, oh, you said that you loved playing piano when you were 10 years old. Did you go out and get that $300 keyboard? Have you, or have you started doing that again? Have you started to find ways to really turn your pain into beauty? So just, it's not that I guess I'm bringing all of this up of there is a lot of trauma. There is a lot there that you need to really address in your life. But accountability should just be it should also help cultivate beauty in your life.
Yeah. I say reward the victories, reward the small victories, and really acknowledge when you are successful, because that's important too. It's not all about what are the consequences, but what are the good consequences? What are the good things that are happening as a result of my mind being so much more clear to live my life and not be so bombarded by the thoughts and feelings and acting out that have driven my life for so long.
It's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Crystal, I mean, one of your talks I listened to earlier, you were talking about, it was the singleness one, that you get these women who feel like they don't know what they don't know. And so they're singles, or maybe they're married and they struggle with masturbation, and they don't realize that they can actually live such a joy-filled life without those things, because, their pleasure centers releasing all this dopamine for, the pornography or masturbation. But like Lisa's saying, once you're able to put some structure in, make traction, be doing things that are healthy, you get so much joy and pleasure out of your new, healthier things that it can replace, what you were getting from the pornography. And it's hard to even imagine that, because it feels like such a struggle, and you feel like you're in a prison when you're first coming out of it, and that it's going to be a white knuckle battle every day, but that your brain can really renew as you start taking care of yourself and putting in those good things, and give you just as much joy. And then you have weeks where you don't even think about pornography or masturbation, and you realize how far you've come.
Yeah, so true. Well, we're almost out of time. I want to make sure that we can get referred to all of the resources that we want to point people to today for their next steps in accountability. For sure, we want to refer to Pure Desire Ministries, because you have lots of tools, lots of things there, including groups that women can join. Even now, I think, right? They can join groups now. Yeah. Which is awesome. And then, of course, we want to remind you about Covenant Eyes. Obviously, you could tell all four of us are big fans of Covenant Eyes, and we definitely want to encourage you to download that right now. You can download it for free for the next 30 days with our promo code She Summit. Definitely want to encourage you to do that. Again, today at 5 p.m. and tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time. You can join us for a virtual meetup. Meet other women who struggle, who are watching the summit, engage in some conversation with them, see if these are people that you can engage in accountability with. Also, as part of She Recovery, which is under my organization, Living on Purpose, we have new groups forming now. They will launch in November. I will be leading one. Kimberly will be leading one. We have one going right now as well on Wednesday nights. So we'll have 3 groups going. Those are groups that you can come to, one or all. And so they're very much kind of AA model, sort of, in the sense of if you need 3 meetings a week, go to 3 meetings a week. If you need 1 meeting, go to 1 meeting. And we facilitate those. I will also be starting a 90-day intensive in November as well. So I'll link to that kind of stuff in tomorrow's rundown email that you get every morning. But certainly want to check out sherecovery.com for more information about the groups that we have, including our private Facebook group that we have as well. So also, there was that fun little She Recovery Accountability Network that you can join in on as well. Any other resources that you ladies want to refer to as well? We get them covered.
The Covenant Eyes website.
Oh, covenanteyes.com.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can link to that from the summit site, covenanteyes.com, and use that promo code She Summit.
The 90-Day to Freedom course for women by Pure Community that I authored.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, ladies, thank you so much for being a part of our summit, being a part of this panel as well, for your wisdom. Thank you all for submitting your questions. They were really, really good questions, really a good conversation. Excited to post this session on the website later for others who weren't here to be able to watch and get your wisdom and advice as well. Thank you for tuning in.